Hi, I'm Dr. Sunita Purushottam, and I'm the Managing Director of GBPN India. Would like to introduce about GBPN and then come to the topic. We are an organization that connects local policymakers and building professionals with industry-leading experts to reform building policies and performance. What we do very well is combine global insights with local action, wanting to change building policy through education, support, and collaboration. And together, we believe we can decarbonize the built environment. Next slide, please. Who are we? We are people who are truly global, based in key locations across the world, and we have some of the brightest minds, determined minds working together to bring knowledge and innovation to sustainable building practices and policy reform. We aim to tackle climate emergency by decarbonizing one of the Earth's most significant pollution sources, carbon pollution sources, the built environment. And we form strong coalitions, and we are known for aggregating effort to deliver maximum impact. Working together with government, industry, local experts, partners, we support building policy reform to increase efficiency and drive down emissions. Together, we can build a healthier and more sustainable world. And this is what we do, supporting evidence-based policy reform, technical guidance on sustainable building and built environment practices, sharing knowledge and policy dialogue to strengthen coordination and effective implementation, removing hurdles that could come in the way of decarbonization. Wanted to bring your attention to the current scenario in India, especially in context of affordable housing. We are looking for increased temperature rise, and this calls for better protection from heat and going beyond the present standards. What does the average 2-degree rise in global temperature mean in urban areas? It could actually result in microenvironments which are 3 to 4 to 5 degrees higher, which are intensified by intense densification and urban heat island effect, which impacts the microclimate. Climate change in India impacts everybody, but with the demand for urban housing, the climate change impact associated with the low income groups and the economically weaker sections is much higher. And it's imperative to look at their health and well being from the context of climate change, which includes heat waves, droughts, storms, flood, which affect the health and well being of those who are poor. Those who are poor are often invisible to the society. And to bring this kind of thought process in the affordable housing segment for small homes, which are in the range of 30 to 50 square meter, with large households, could lead to social and psychological stress due to limited community resources. Next slide, please. So India needs a massive scale up of affordable urban housing, and this demand is very high when it comes to the low income groups. But today, the focus on the building is for building more units quickly. Whether these homes can protect people from heat, climate risk, or support their well being is not being questioned. And this point about natural ventilation, heat exposure could increase stress. Overcrowded buildings lack shared spaces, shade, community infrastructure, adding to mental and social strain. All of these in the affordable segment currently are not being factored. And therefore, it was imperative for us to see how healthy climate resilient design is actually not a luxury, but it helps in protecting the lives, health, and well being of low income urban residents. Next slide, please. So, the conceptualization of the holistic definition of health and well being, especially for invisible segment of the society who live in affordable housing or for whom homes are being designed under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, PMAY, now currently the version 2 of the program, it is important to understand how to design such that ventilation, daylight, open space, and social infrastructure within the buildings could affect health outcomes. So this is quite holistic in context of climate change, resilience, adaptation and mitigation, health and well-being, and especially from women's perspective, a gender perspective as well. Next slide. Thank you. We are looking at defining this. So, what are the determinants of health from a holistic perspective? We can look at psychological health, social health, physical health, and resilience against climate change. I'll bring up the resilience against climate change. One, it is protecting against disruption, availability of water when there is a flood, building community resilient against diseases, against heat and heat related challenges. Psychological health arises, issues arise because of inadequate spaces, lack of privacy, safety, especially for women. Access to nature. What about choice, flexibility, and how people choose to live? Social health comes from social interaction, the gender equity, and what kind of limits to density and crowding can be put. So it's not about considering only the physical health, but it's important to look at the social, psychological, and resilience against climate change. We come to physical health, which is most palpable, understandable, but few things associated with physical health that we have to really consider are our exposure to heat and how we are impacted with lack of light or a lot of light. How do we protect ourselves from diseases and pollution? So these are the key determinants, especially in the context of healthy, affordable housing. Next slide, please. So the stand that we have taken associated with these determinants is arriving it from three objectives. Is it low carbon? Is it affordable? And the four determinants of health. So we need to combine all of these things because ultimately the way we are building will impact the health and well-being. In affordable segment, the challenge is the cost of land and cost of construction, the cost of operation and maintenance, which could put a financial stress and hence a psychological stress on the inhabitants. So whatever interventions we do need to be at no cost or low cost options. The low carbon aspect is about embodied carbon and operational carbon and the integration of renewable energy, which could reduce the cost of maintenance significantly, provide for emergency energy provision in case of disruptions, climate related disruption. Uh, the embodied energy and operational energy are interlinked. And while it is technical, the way to explain it in context of healthy, affordable urban housing is to look for homes that are well ventilated, climate responsive, have enough light and air flowing through so that they can live without artificial cooling, especially with high-end air conditioners. Fan first cooling, passive design are the areas of operational carbon emission reduction. Embodied carbon could look at various materials that could reduce the cost of construction and keep the homes low in terms of low embodied carbon, as well as provide that thermal comfort and the U value which is required for maintaining the operational conditions within the home thermally comfortable. Next slide. What are the real benefits? So what we looked at we actually piloted this in Gujarat in the amongst the economically weaker sections and low income group, especially migrant workers, which work in textile, diamond, and industrial belts. And these communities often live in congested, poorly ventilated homes. Women, children, elderly suffer from extreme heat or flooding. By focusing on affordable but healthy, we can address the state's most vulnerable population. And in Gujarat, the high rise housing is expensive to build, and it's nearly impossible for the economically weaker section to maintain. So, suggesting that low rise G plus 3 uh, units, blocks, can reduce upfront cost and long term expenses. Simple interventions such as roof coating can cut indoor temperatures, especially in the top floors, by 2 to 3 degrees, and in certain cases, up to 4 to 6 degrees. It's such a lifesaver in Ahmedabad and Bhavnagar during the heat waves. Roof insulation pays for itself in energy bills just within 2 years. For areas such as Kutch and Saurashtra, which are affected by drought, integrating rainwater harvesting is not optional, it is essential. These practical and affordable solutions tailored to Gujarat's need can really help in creating health impacts, which are the real benefits. It can reduce the lower the cost, and it can reduce the rise of installation of ACs if we design it as passive first, and it can make Gujarat state a leader in sustainable development and directly contribute to our national climate and improve public health across the state. Next slide, please. India's future, especially in context of guidelines as it is constructing Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana homes, around 40 million homes are going to be built in this next stage of development. Instead of doing unsustainable construction, if we were to follow the trajectory of passive design, climate responsive design, low carbon material, efficient design, better insulation, eco-friendly materials, leading to sustainable construction and low emissions, could result in 150 metric tons of CO2 emission reduction per year, aligning to SDG 13 for climate action, SDG 12 for responsible consumption and production, SDG 11 for sustainable cities. Yeah. So, what we would like to bring about is also change in South through South-South collaboration. And we have been speaking to Indonesia and the GBPN work program in Indonesia. And we have had a great interaction with Indonesia's Ministry of Housing and Settlements, which has a very ambitious target of 1 million homes, which need to be high performance by 2030. And by 2050, all new existing housing to achieve net zero emissions. By adopting green affordable housing program designs, cutting thermal stress, saving water, reducing emissions, preventing landfill waste. The idea is to also see how the India-Indonesia exchange of ideas in South-South collaboration can help deliver scalable, people-centered climate solutions. And in both countries, GBPN supports as technical advisor and convener, bringing together ministries, architects, researchers, and local government. It supports evidence generation, capacity building, and development of actionable guidelines that connect national targets with household realities. Sharing the Kenya efforts that GBPN is doing, we are developing a roadmap for healthy, affordable housing in Kenya. Similar challenges of unplanned, rapid urbanization, and we are looking at Kenya to support Kenya's leadership as a signatory to the Buildings Breakthrough and the Paris Agreement through multi-sector action to achieve 90% renewable energy in the built environment by 2050. The roadmap has three areas: policy recommendation on green building codes and low carbon materials, priority interventions to design affordable housing that are energy efficient, digitally permitted to drive compliance, and capacity building to strengthen local workforces and country level knowledge sharing. This creates an opportunity to reduce emissions in existing buildings, new buildings with a total mitigation potential of 6.2 metric tons. This actually, as climate impacts intensify, the stakes could not be higher. By learning across programs in India, Indonesia, and Kenya, we are well set up to shape a new model for the global south where affordable housing, healthy standards, and climate resilience reinforce each other. Together, we can decarbonize the building sector. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to represent GBPN at COP30 in Belém. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Sunita Purushottam. That was extremely insightful. Appreciate your intervention and the flexibility of being able to use your presentation to kick off our session today. Now that it seems that we have more of our speakers here and some audience, let me start over and tell you what this is about. My name is Judy Zakreski again. The session is Building Affordable and Resilient Homes for a Changing Climate. And I think that initial presentation kicked us off quite nicely. We're here to talk about resilient housing because we have an affordability crisis around the world. Communities around the world are grappling with challenges in having adequate housing, enough housing, and then on top of that, housing that's resilient to the current and future climate risks, addressing sustainability, public health, and equity. We have a great group of speakers here today to share case studies of the work that has been done around the world with some innovative approaches to addressing the affordability crisis, the healthy and sustainable and resilient housing crisis. And I would like to start us off by inviting Yves-Laurent Sapoval, the Ministerial Delegate for Sustainable Cities, an Urban Envoy, Ministry of Territories, Ecology and Housing from France, and also the chair of the Intergovernmental Council on Buildings and Climate. Yves-Laurent, please give us your insights.
10 minutes is about, or yes, I mean, it's good because it gives time to talk about the situation, where we are, what are the challenges, maybe talk about the costs and the question of reducing costs and solutions. So when we say there's a globe, I think it's a bit new that housing is recognized as a global crisis. Nevertheless, situations are very different across the countries. I think we need absolutely keep this in mind. Otherwise, we're just gonna tackle the wrong problems. So, I'm gonna talk a little bit about France, what's happening, but I can get also I can have some examples from Japan, for example, or Europe. And of course, we need to talk about the emerging and developing countries, which are not the same question again. If we look at the numbers, I don't know, UN Habitat is saying that about approximately 2.8 billion people are living into inadequate housing. What means exactly inadequate housing? You have to bear in mind that the definition following the UN of adequate housing doesn't embed by now sustainability. So it's there's I think 7 criterias, but no, sustainability is not one of them. So there are immense quantitative needs around the world. Mostly, of course, in developing and emerging countries, because us, with the population growing old, we're supposed to have less needs, which is not the case everywhere, because the needs are different, but there are needs. So I'm going to get a little bit more to deep dive into that. But if I can give the example of Japan, Japan has a decreasing population. But there are some needs of adaptation to elderly people. There are some needs of adaptation to the climate. So many urban challenges for them. If I look at the situation in France, it's a little bit of a paradox. We are the country in Europe that has the biggest stock of housing in Europe, and that is building each year the biggest share of housing, and still we have a housing crisis. So it's interesting, it's not easy to analyze. We have approximately 30 million dwellings. Let's say 29 million are primary residencies. And within that, we have about 5 million social housing. I'll come back to that because it's rental social housing. It's an interesting, a very interesting, I think, model to talk about. But the situation we have is that the cost of housing is really rising. the cost of use and the cost of property and the rents. Everything is rising, and it's not rising in the same proportion for the poor people than for the rich people. And if I can share this with you, it is much more difficult to be a poor household in a bad home than a rich people in a good home. If I take I don't exactly know how it is in English, the share of revenues that is dedicated to housing monthly or yearly, it's about, if for someone that owns his house, so is potentially richer, it's about 6%, and for somebody who is poor and doesn't rent and is renting, it's approximately 37%. So you see that I think this is a challenge many places in the world, but I know about the French situation, but I think that's so France has been for a long time relatively low in terms of these kind of efforts, but it is growing rapidly. It was, I think it was 20 years ago, about 20% in average, and it's now 27% in average, which means that it's growing a lot. Okay, this is due to the rise of the cost of houses. Of course, the real estate has been growing. Real estate was relatively low compared to Europe at the moment. For example, compared to London, it was in Paris very, very low, but then it became more difficult. Just want to point out, not to be too long on this question, the fact that so of course we also have a housing crisis in Europe. Different situations, but housing crisis, which motivated the nomination of a new commissioner on housing and energy, which is interesting because it's linking housing and energy, meaning that this problem is taken into account, and there is a wish at the European level to tackle this question. Just to come back on our system of let's say social housing, because I think it's a solution, and it's a solution for many countries. We have a social housing system where we have basically simple system with social landlords that are very professional, that are sometimes owning more than 300,000 dwellings, meaning it's enormous and very, very capable landlords in terms of construction, in terms of social management, and in terms of management of the building. So it's very professional. None of these landlords can be less than 12,000 dwelling. So to be sure that they are really professionals. And these are, it's like a box, it's non-profit, and no money can get out of it. So it's a closed box, and when we put money in it, we know that it will serve either retrofitting or construction of new social housing. And the deal is this one: we give you money, and you lower the rents for means-tested households. So it's quite a and we. With the money, we also give some very long-term loans that can go until 80 years for the land, which allows investment and this decreasing this amortization of investment in the long run. I will come back to that because I think it's a very important question in terms of costs, and cost is quality in the same time. So very long-term loans that are given by the Caisse des Dépôts et Consignations. I won't get too much into that. Long-term loans, grants also from what we call the participations of the employers to the construction effort. It's 0.45% of the wages of the companies of more than 50 employees, meaning that it's a very big stock of money going to social housing through this. Well, anyway, that's keep in mind that rental housing is, to my opinion, a solution for the question we are trying to tackle here. So if we now get into costs, we must bear in mind that construction and conception costs are only, in average, 30% of the global cost of housing. Between 20 to 50% goes to the land, which is of course an enormous question. So it means that if you lower the cost of the land by 10%, you can easy build some sustainable housing, of course, because the price you save on the land, you can invest on the construction. And the third part, which is very often not seen, is financial and administrative costs. And this is up to 28%. We need to bear in mind that apart from the construction, apart from the architects, apart from the engineers, apart from the land, 28% goes to, I don't know, administrative and financial costs, which is, we need to keep this in mind. And I was in Canada, and that was, they had a very, it must, maybe it's not the global figure, I don't know exactly, but in Canada it was the fact I was very surprised to see that, because they have a very precise analysis of where the costs of construction are. Of course, this challenge of raising costs of construction is a real challenge, and it's often put on the shoulders of sustainability. We now end in a kind of, we are trapped into this false opposition between affordability and sustainability, which is not the case. This is something that we know. Of course, affordability and sustainability not only must go hand in hand, but de facto go hand in hand, because poorly built house is more operational costs and is more retrofitting costs. So every house that we build now, ready to retrofit, is going to be a cost later. So in the long run, and we absolutely need to think of this in the long term, and in the long term, affordability and sustainability, quality is the same thing. When we have been in France building very fast with very, well, it was quality at the moment, but we know that it was not quality really at the moment. We were really fast and cheap, let's say. But it's true that, you know, and we now have an urban renewal program that is more than 75 billion euros for these social housing that we have been building very fast because there was very big needs, and so we wanted to go very fast and very cheap at the moment. Okay, so we need to keep this in mind, specifically for the developing and emerging countries. And when we see what is happening that on the ground, we can be preoccupied. I don't know how long I have now. I know. Do you tell me? Huh? Okay, so if I'm almost to the end, I just want to say that what has been decided here at the ICBC, and it's interesting for us just to know. As France, we have always been pushing these two agendas in terms of international action on. So we've been pushing the agenda of affordable housing through and adequate housing through UN Habitat for long years, and so there is a resolution of UN Habitat on adequate housing for all that we are chairing the open-ending working group, working on definitions and things like that. And we also advocated very much for the to recenter the action of UN Habitat on housing. Believe it or not, it was not their main mission for years. And on the other hand, you know, we've been advocating for sustainable buildings. And what is interesting now is that we see that they're working on affordable housing and sustainable and affordable and adequate housing. They begin to think that adequate housing is not going to be adequate without sustainability. So we will probably succeed into embedding this definition of sustainability within the adequate housing there. And on the other hand, we collectively here, working on buildings, suddenly took into account that 60% of buildings is housing. So we will not succeed on this matter of sustainable buildings without succeeding on this matter of sustainable housing. And housing is the most difficult part because it's one by one household. Now I'm going to give you a very brief example because I want to be quick. When you renovate, it's a personal example. Yeah. I renovated because I'm working with green buildings and etc. I don't know whether I do that, but I did that. I renovated my house in the Paris suburbs. It's a place where it's not a very expensive place. It's kind of 5,000 euros a square meters. I don't know how it compares to your capitals, but for New York, it's so. Of course, it's not. Well, so it's well, let's say. So I've been renovating it. So as it is a nice house, 120 square meters, not enormous, but 120 square meters, a very nice house from outside. And I'm a trained architect. I didn't want to, to change the shape of the house, putting some outside like insulation. So I've put the insulation inside. So not only I had to redo my electricity and plumbery and etc., which is usual, but I just want you to bear in mind that I lost 6 square meters in insulation. Meaning that not even eating my first piece of cake in terms of, I lost 30,000 euros just in square meters values. And this gives an idea of the complexity of renovating, what we need to do renovation, okay? And so, and on the other hand, of course, this question of building new buildings, it's true that this is really key now to it's really key to build only quality housing and sustainable housing, because what you don't do on the first place, it's much more costly later. And what economical studies have been showing is that the sooner you intervene into even the conception of home, the sooner you act on sustainability, the better quality price average you have. And it's very clear. When you conceive a house through, for example, bioclimatic of passive housing, you are able to manage the works better, to have better quality and have a better quality of use and a cheaper house at the end of the day. So that's what I wanted to say globally. And it's interesting to see that here it's a first COP, thanks to Brazil, that when we are joining this question of affordability and adequate housing to sustainability of buildings through the Belém call that we've been issuing at the ICBC 2 days ago. It's exactly that. Do not oppose. They go hand in hand. They go jointly, and it's inseparable. So do not oppose it and do and act accordingly. Many other things to say, but that's basically what I wanted to say to introduce here.
Thank you, Yves Laurent. We'll bring you back up at the end for part of the panel discussion. I think that Yves Laurent's point that affordability, adequate housing, enough housing is a global problem, and the point that the solutions need to be different depending on whether you're in the global north, global south, and then on a country-by-country basis is a very good point. And we're going to be talking about some of that today. We heard it in the initial session, and I'm happy to welcome to the podium Ryan Kolker, who's going to speak a little bit about some of the solutions that have been adopted in the United States and beyond to address the affordability crisis and the housing crisis in the United States. Ryan is the Executive Director for Energy, Resilience, and Innovation at the International Code Council, and I'll turn it over to Ryan. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, and really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about, also important to note, we do have a Slido for folks that are online. If you have questions, we will have a panel Q&A discussion later, so you can capture that. I want to talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we've seen within this space. But first, let me give you sort of a quick introduction to the International Code Council and why we're particularly interested in these issues. So ICC is probably best known for the development of model building codes and standards, which support many of the things that Yves Laurent talked about relative to energy efficiency, resilience, sustainability. And we recognize that to make those codes and standards effective, you need the tools around them to support a broader ecosystem that helps on the implementation side. And so ICC really supports sort of all of those pieces. You can go to the next slide. And so as we look at the opportunities or the needs across the industry and across society, we really identified offsite construction as an opportunity to address many of those challenges. So if we think about sort of speed of construction, having a factory-built system at the same time that you're doing the site work, sort of speeds up that process. You can also be very deliberate about sort of how you engineer and fabricate the systems. We're also dealing, particularly in the global north, with challenges of the availability of a workforce for the construction industry. And so if you move elements of the construction process into the factory, number one, it becomes more efficient. But number two, you can attract much more diverse workforce. So if someone's going to the same site every day, they know their hours. I have a colleague who says it's always sunny and 75 in the factory, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. You can also be more deliberate about how you use materials. Because you're a very engineered system, you can be more effective about reducing waste. Being in the factory also helps support quality because you're not out in the rain, the snow, the elements. So materials are, much more, are not subject to sort of spoilage and those sorts of challenges. Additionally, you have sort of the job site safety elements of offsite construction as well. Because, again, everything's done in the factory, you don't have the challenge of, for on-site projects, having lots of tradespeople in the same space at the same time, climbing up ladders and sort of working on top of each other. And so you can go to the next slide. To really support the development and the implementation of offsite construction, ICC has developed a suite of standards that focus on the process for approvals of offsite construction elements. So how do we assure that what's actually landing up at the job site is achieving the standards, the codes, and requirements that they need to meet? You can go to the next slide. And so, with sort of that quick snapshot of offsite construction, as a strategy, we see that as an opportunity in many different places. And so we have a team from southern Brazil that have actually leveraged offsite construction to support housing in disaster recovery. And so we have a recording of their presentation, and I'll turn it over to the video now.
So, hi everyone, I'm Daniela Viana. We are going to present the work Leveraging Innovative Approaches to Deliver Resilient and Climate Responsive Housing. It is part of the graduate program in civil engineering at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul and comes from our research lab called Modulab. Our main effort has been to create a path toward a more industrialized construction sector. Doris and I are the professors leading this research field. Guilherme will present his PhD research program, and Bruna will share an interesting example of modular construction from the company CMC Modular. We operate at the interface between construction management and economics and building materials and technology. You can learn more about our lab through the QR code. Our research began within the Construa Brasil project and aimed to propose guidelines for developing and refining technical standards that encourage the use of modularity and modular coordination. We have been working on the development of Brazilian standards to encourage more companies to adopt platform-based solution, making modular construction more feasible and scalable. Now I leave the path for Guilherme.
Hi everyone, I'm Guilherme from URGS. In April and May 2024, our state, Rio Grande do Sul, in southern Brazil, faced a record-breaking flooding event that was considered the biggest hydrological disaster in Brazil history. Around 2.4 million people were affected in 96% of the cities of the state, as shown in the pink and blue areas in map 1. Around 146,000 people were displaced from their homes. Map 2 shows the concentration of households affected in the state. Map 3 presents a closer look to the Guaíba Lake drainage basin. In red, you can see the flood extent compared to the water body's original extent in blue. In the upper right side, you can take a closer look in the city of Canoas and its affected homes. Societal resilience is a society's ability to anticipate, absorb, adapt to, and recover from such events, leveraging the people, institutions, infrastructures, and communities in order to maintain the essential services needed. In this event, shelters provided temporary housing for the displaced. The number of sheltered people in the state peaked at 78,000 people on May 12, 2024. Previous stressors also played a detrimental role. The most affected people in the metropolitan region of Porto Alegre, our capital city, were also the ones that had the lowest average incomes, as shown in the map on the right. To this day, thousands of families still wait for a new home in Rio Grande do Sul. Addressing temporary and permanent housing needs of the people affected support societal resilience and society's ability to bounce back better. Housing provides a sense of place and should meet social and emotional requirements of the individuals both in the short and long terms. In COP16, human mobility was recognized as a form of adaptation to the effects of climate change. Climate migrations, planned relocation, and displacements are expected to increase in the next decades, requiring suitable solutions to address housing needs and supporting societal resilience.
Hi, my name is Bruna, and I'll be here to showcase our first 25 homes delivered. Please. In this southern Brazil after the floods. These were 25 homes built in Nova Brescia, the city of Nova Brescia, and each home has 50 square meters of living space, and each one fits into a one truck load and can be easily assembled on site. And this was the first phase. You can change, please. This was the first phase of a larger effort from local government and private companies to rebuild the homes and families for the families affected by the flood. And our system has been proven and tested for many years. After many years in different sectors, such as mining and other infrastructure sectors, such as hospitality, where a high base construction is needed. So for us, delivering a high quality and structurally sound home was very important. So here you can see some of the pictures of the houses being built at the factory. You see the construction happens at the same time as production in the factory. And that overlap can save up to 30% of total construction time without losing any quality or scope. We chose to combine 3D modular and panelized modular systems to provide families with a hassle-free home. So that means low maintenance and durable over time. Please change. So normally this kind of public housing project can take months to get through all the paperwork and permits needed. And that's why modular was a key solution to speed up the process. So these homes, you can see, they look very similar to traditional built, but they have a very low carbon intake, and the system is very flexible in terms of architectural design. Please change. And this is just a great example of how modular construction can bring innovation and speed and low carbon impact to residential building, because we're not just building homes, we're actually rebuilding lives. So here's a quick video of how the system works.
Thank you for your attention, and we are open to your questions.
Thanks so much. I'll turn it back over to Judy.
Thank you to Ryan and Guilhem and the whole team from the university. That was really interesting, and it's interesting to see similar solutions being employed in the Global North and the Global South. We're going to move more to the Global South right now. From GBPN, Haley St. Dennis, who is the head of Just Transitions at the Institute for Human Rights and Business, is going to present a case study about healthy housing in India. No? Spain? Catalonia. Please, yes, Haley.
Thanks so much, Judy. No problem at all. Yes, slight focus, actually. This is a more Global North story, but one looking at Catalonia and Barcelona, the city of. I do have a few slides, if it's possible. There we go. Thank you. So, as Judy said, I'm Haley St. Dennis. I'm with the Institute for Human Rights and Business, IHRB, working to really make human rights part of everyday business. And one of our projects that we have been implementing over the last 2 years within our climate action work, our Just Transitions program, is a project called Just Stories, which is looking for examples of just transitions in action, really the best of the best that we can find that have enough advancement in actual implementation that we can really look at the evidence to say they're working, and especially unpack the people, the perspectives, and the relationships behind what is making them so effective and how they're combining decarbonization with dignity at the center. And I'm very excited to share a bit of a sneak preview of our third story in the series that'll be coming out toward the end of this month, looking at housing in Barcelona. I'm sure many of you know Barcelona is in many ways kind of the poster child for both the affordability crisis and also being on the front lines of the climate crisis, and a 40-degree future being their lived reality right now. So what is happening in Catalonia is really nothing short of a housing revolution. It is, what we're really seeing is an alternative system emerging, one that is really trying to tackle affordability and decarbonization simultaneously. And that's not being driven by any one single actor, I think one of the really interesting things about what's happening in Barcelona is that it's an ecosystem that is really driving this at scale. So it's very partnership-based between both regional and local authorities, between housing associations and cooperatives, but also banks, private enterprises, and what they all fundamentally emphasized to us as we visited and met with each in turn to learn about their approach was that this is really based on needs of residents, not speculation. And so it's really trying to ground the approach that housing needs to be seen as social infrastructure, not just as a financial commodity. And if you will change to the next slide, I just have a few images of the people involved. Is it possible to change to the next slide? Could we go to the next slide? Thank you. So here's a wide shot of Barcelona in case you haven't seen, but next image shows one of the developments that we visited. So this is a development called Casa Bloc in the heart of Barcelona. It's a 1930s modernist building that fell into disrepair for many decades, but now houses 17 families that were at risk of homelessness, either fleeing violence or illness within their lives. And so it was restored by an incredible housing association called Habitat Tres, in partnership with the city government, with energy company Ariston, and with telecom firm Cellnex. And through triple glazing, through communal heat pump systems, and digital connectivity, they have cut bills while also cutting carbon. And you can see Adama there, one of the residents in the top left, who herself said, "Now we have peace. This is not just a flat, this is my home." And this is really dignity in housing. It's cooler in the summers, it's warmer in the winters, it's affordable, and it's stable. The method, I think, as much as anything, is really its beauty. So it's financed in part by EU climate funds, but it's managed by nonprofit associations, built by private firms, and enabled by public policy. So it's this ecosystem method, as I say, that's really starting to spread across Catalonia. And if you change to the next slide, you'll see another example here in Sitges, a very popular and until recently quite expensive tourist destination in Barcelona, where you're seeing new developments now lowering rents from 18 euros per square meter to 6. That's primarily through AA energy ratings and rooftop solar. So you're seeing this ecosystem method at work. In the next slide, you'll see another example in Saint-Valou. This is a residence for older people, and really it's trying to redefine aging as a design challenge. So here, residents are enjoying independence, they're enjoying comfort, community, all in a passive energy building. And if you go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, thank you. Here you'll see some of the ecosystem architects behind an incredible development called Cirerer. It's a timber-framed building that stores 660 tons of carbon in its structure, winning the Sustainability Prize at the 2022 Advanced Architecture Awards. So these projects might sound a bit small, but they are genuinely systems changing. And I think one of the key messages that really stuck with me after visiting with so many of these incredible leaders is that I think when we talk about adequacy in housing and the kind of solutions needed, these aren't necessarily grand solutions. They're just intelligent solutions. So we're really seeing in Barcelona that housing can be stable, supportive, and low carbon, and the statistics really support this. So this needs-based system is managing thousands of homes. It's saving 18,000 tons of carbon while cutting energy poverty in half. And we really estimate that for every euro spent on retrofits here, the city is saving 2 euros on health costs and on energy subsidies. So it's a triple win. You're getting tenants, owners, and industry all benefiting. And in many ways, we see it as a blueprint for dignity by design. Housing as a right, climate action as social policy, and collaboration as the method. So happy, Judy, to share a little more in terms of some of the lessons we think this yields if there's time and that's helpful. But otherwise, please look out for the launch of this story on just-stories.org at the end of this month.
Thank you so much, Haley. That was, apologies for my mischaracterization of what we were going to be hearing about. That's a really great story, and I think we're always talking about vulnerable communities and serving those vulnerable communities, regardless of whether they are in a developed country or an emerging economy. The last presentation, I would like to introduce Ariana Karamalis from Build Change to talk about some of the projects that Build Change is working on in resilient housing. Ariana?
Thank you. Whoa, geez, sorry. Thank you, Judy. Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and inviting me to be here today. I'm Ariana Karamalis, Global Advocacy and Development Manager at Build Change. I can't really see the slide. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, great. Thanks. Could you go to the next slide, please? Build Change is a global leader in systems change for resilient housing, increasing access to resilient housing in some of the world's most disaster-prone countries. We use a homeowner-driven systems change approach to do this, related to policy, money, and technology in order to scale affordable, inclusive, locally relevant, climate-resilient housing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just showing kind of all the places we've worked in the past 20 years. You can move on. Great, thank you. Today I wanted to talk about a couple of aspects of our work that are particularly relevant to this conversation. How we've helped shape local housing policies and building and construction guidelines to include resilient solutions for informal housing, and our research on embodied carbon savings, demonstrating that retrofitting and upgrading existing informal housing, which is our preferred approach to addressing the need for resilient housing worldwide, is not only more affordable and better for communities, but better for the planet, as well as making a strong case for the intersection of resilience and mitigation measures. Let's start off with that second point on embodied carbon. If you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. In 2023, Build Change published a report called Saving Embodied Carbon Through Strengthening Existing Housing, which shows that 2/3 of a house's embodied carbon can be saved by upgrading instead of building new. This translates into up to 4.8 gigatons of CO2 emissions that could be saved globally through retrofitting, while improving the lives of 268 million households worldwide living in inadequate housing. The report draws on over 300 case studies and highlights retrofitting as a crucial adaptation and mitigation strategy. For instance, each retrofitted home can save up to 18 metric tons of carbon emissions, contributing significantly to global emission reduction goals. I just want to pause here because I think something that I've kind of learned in my time at Build Change is, and in this sector, is that like retrofitting means different things to different people. So, we heard earlier, and I've heard also that in some cases, there's studies that show that retrofitting for energy savings and emission, can be more expensive and not necessarily achieve the same things that I'm talking about here. And what we're talking about is really retrofitting informal housing across the global south, mostly for structural resilience and climate resilience. So it's a little bit different. And I think that is just important to point out that there's a little bit of differences there. And, in most cases, in our experience and in the work that we do, we try to always include habitability improvements as well. So increasing the sizes of windows if that's going to help with ventilation, maybe repositioning windows and doorways for that same purpose, improving how natural light comes into the house, all those different things. So we really try to tick all of those boxes. Okay, in addition to all that, retrofitting empowers families to adapt to the changing climate while reducing overall carbon emissions. And I think this really speaks to some of the points that were raised earlier and the kind of overall argument, which is that, you know, we can have affordable housing that is sustainable in that it's not going to be knocked over or, you know, destroyed in the next disaster, and sustainable in that if we approach it in this way, we are, you know, contributing less to the overall emissions, while at the same time helping these families adapt to increased climate impacts, helping them stay in their communities, helping them continue to build livelihood opportunities. A lot of the people we work with have home-based businesses, so when their house is damaged or destroyed, it impacts their ability to make a living. So it really has these all-around improvement effects. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, okay, so I think I said this already. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, okay, great. So prioritizing retrofitting does require government buy-in, though, and investment from private and multilateral sources. We have some examples of where this has been effective. For example, in Colombia, we've reformed permitting processes, updated national guidelines, and leveraged World Bank financing to enable and scale resilient housing programs that allow for incremental upgrades to informal housing. Since 2014, we've worked with the government in Colombia to shape policy to allow for these upgrades. This led to the adoption in 2023 by the Ministry of Housing in Colombia of IES 410 within the Colombian seismic standard. And this is the first officially endorsed guidelines to focus primarily on upgrading informally built housing. And can we go to the next slide? Whoops. Thanks. In Haiti, we are currently partnering with CDRI and the national government there to revise the housing chapter of the National Building Code, integrating best practices for climate resilient construction and prioritizing retrofitting existing housing for windstorm and seismic resilience. Drawing on over a decade of experience in Haiti, we've developed a model that localizes international standards, incorporates vernacular building methodologies and without compromising safety, and embeds stakeholder engagement throughout the process. The climate crisis is arguably the most urgent problem of our time, and retrofitting existing housing can offer a solution that makes it possible for adequate housing to reach communities who need it most while safeguarding our planet's future. Thanks.
Thank you. Ooh, that one is even louder. Thank you, Ariana. I'm going to invite all of our panelists to, you can stay there, to stay up on the stage. Yes, please come. And we're gonna try to do our best with the technology. We have, no, this is the wrong, this is the right one. This is a Slido that we have set up for people who are on the live stream. If you'd like to ask questions, if you're sitting here in the room, you do not have to do the Slido. But if anyone's joining us on the live stream, we want to be able to enable you to ask questions. But I'm going to take the first, and now we can have the presenters who pre-recorded their sessions. We're going to try to get them online here as well, so they'll be able to be on our panel. But I'm going to, while they're working on that technical detail, I'm going to start with those of you in the room. My first question, something that stands out in all of the presentations that we've heard today is an underlying focus on dignity and humanity. And these are things that we're not always hearing when we're talking about emission reductions and nationally determined contributions. So I think it's so important and so valuable to remember that we're talking about people and humans, and that's also why I celebrate the Belém call for action for sustainable and affordable housing. That is fully aligned, I think, with the work that all of you are doing. And so I think we need to be very happy that this is being elevated and celebrate that. But what I would like to ask each of you is, how would you describe the inclusion in your focus of humanity and dignity, how does that impact your organization in improving affordability, resilience, and sustainability? So it's sort of core to what you're doing, but how does that inform the work that you do? And maybe Ariana, I'll start with you.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that at Build Change, as well as for me personally, that is really like what our work is all about. I mean, it's about resilient housing and increasing access to resilient housing, but I think that the principles that you talked about are really what drives the work that we do. And yeah, so I mean, one of the ways that what that looks like and how we work, our approach is, as I said, it's a systems change approach, but it's homeowner driven. And the homeowners themselves are always at the center of the process, whether that's on the ground, you know, working with the homeowner in engaging them on what their level of affordability is, what the upgrades they need are, what kinds of habitability improvements they want, et cetera. Or if that's, you know, designing different technologies, we have a digital technical assistance platform that I find really exciting because of its potential to do this, to scale housing, to reach communities that wouldn't otherwise be able to reach it by putting technical expertise into the hands of just about anybody who can like hold a mobile device. So, you know, I think that, you know, and then also just in the policy work that we do, like so much of the policy advising that we try to do is not just to incorporate resilience into the housing policy, but to really make resilient housing accessible, affordable to the communities that need it the most and the communities that are impacted the most by disasters and the impacts of climate change, you know, because of like systemic, long-standing systemic exclusion that they've experienced. So it really is, all of those things are really like very much at the core of all of the different ways that we do the work that we do at Build Change.
Yeah, well, I think nobody would deny that dignity, that housing is a part of dignity, and safe housing is a part of dignity. So I'm going to leave this apart because I think it's it's quite a common question. I think nobody really can say, okay, well, it's really a part of being a family, being a part of being a person, to have a roof and a safe roof. So and heating, and I mean, it's a part of your health. So, well, I would take this as for granted. Okay. A few, maybe an information. In France, we have a right to housing, mandatory, meaning that someone that is not in let's say, a normal housing condition can sue the government, which is quite hard to assume as a government, as we are. But since 2008, it is the case in France. It doesn't solve everything, of course, because it doesn't solve the lack of housing, the need for housing, but it is certainly recognized as a part of the dignity. It is recognized by the rights, the diverse multilateral agreements also. So, but here we translate it into physical, legal framework, which is quite challenging. I have two questions though. One is on slums, and the question on up to which point we need to legalize land occupation. This is where there is really a danger for people, because of course people tend to go in dangerous places because they can't go anywhere else. The cost of securing those places can be very high, and so the question of the opposition of relocation or not is a real question, and we faced that in Mayotte, for example, last time. So it's an open question. It's not like as if I have an answer, neither the means to answer. But I think this is a question, because we often face this in these in international debates. And I've been adding the open-ending working group on adequate housing. I've been mentioning was very in favor of legalizing, and I had to add a sentence saying, well, when it's too dangerous or it's not feasible, please don't put this into the hand of governments that don't have the means to act. So that's one question. The second question is, for many people, having a house or a home goes with ownership. And I really do think that it's two different questions. And the system we have in France of rental social housing is really providing homes. People cannot be, I don't know how, thrown out. How do you call that?
Evicted.
Evicted, yes. So it's basically a home for life, but it is not ownership. And in the meantime, we have some systems to ensure affordable housing and affordable property through dissociation of the land and the build structure, meaning you can rent the land and own the building. So the question is, of course, yes, it is a piece of dignity, but until where we go on this question of dignity on both sides, I mean, that's two questions, and many people in the countries I see, I'm going to tell you again a personal story. I've been discussing with a minister from a country in Africa where there's obviously many needs for housing, and I said, why don't you develop a structured rental housing sector, whether it is social or even regulate the housing sector? And the minister said, rental is not interesting my population. I'm not going to act on rental because this is not a political question for me. But when I look, and we made a study on his capital town, 80% of the dwellers are renting. So that's just something that, you see what I mean? There's a way to interrogate this dignity you're talking about a little further than just saying, okay, everybody needs to have a safe home. That's what I want to say.
Continue thinking outside the box to find good solutions. Yeah, Haley?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question of how dignity shows up in our work at the Institute for Human Rights and Business, it's everything that we do. We actually have a framework for designing dignity by design in the built environment, which is a tool for practitioners throughout the built environment value chain to really operationalize this. So we see dignity really as a design brief for the transition, because when you think about it from an outcomes perspective, when people feel safe, when they feel connected and comfortable, then climate resilience becomes a lived reality, not just a KPI. And we really like to show these examples where they're coming to life, because we as humans really learned through that example. Cognitive science really emphasizes that. So we see it as a way of really promoting leadership and scale. And for Catalonia, the example we shared earlier, I think dignity shows up really in three ways. Firstly, within the architecture itself. So housing is comfortable, it's healthy, and it's low carbon by design. Also within the governance in Catalonia, so you have cooperatives and housing associations giving residents a real say about the design and living conditions, and also within the real economy. So you have fair wage supply chains rebuilding skills and livelihoods in construction. And as we know, Barcelona is one of the cities that was hit hardest by the 2008 financial crisis, has been recovering ever since. And the construction sector is particularly weakened, so essential to tackling the existential green skills challenge that affects the entire transition. And as one, social enterprise put it to us, speculative housing was a disease that infected many construction companies. Now what is emerging is fair, dignified, and sort of alternative supply chains that are employing and training hundreds in green buildings and renewable energy installation. And that's not to say that this example in Barcelona is perfect or without its challenges. None, I think, really are. So the system is still fragile and the barriers are still very real. Everything from rising construction costs and land prices really testing affordability. You have small organizations that can't actually recruit fast enough for their developments right now. There is a looming end to the EU recovery funds that have been so essential to powering the system's development over just the last few years. And that, if it goes away next year, will create a financing vacuum. And there is also a need to close some regulatory loopholes in Spain, just building on what you said, around landlords being able to change rent-controlled units to short-term lets. And alongside that, that kind of ever-present risk of gentrification coming from, sustainability in housing inadvertently driving up prices. So as a relatively new position in Spain, a housing commissioner put it to us, if policy doesn't keep pace with practice, then that risks these social innovations, this idea of dignity in housing coming to life, really serving only the lucky few.
Thank you. Inspirational. We actually have very little time left, and I want to get to Guillaume because he's joining us. Sorry, Ariana. Guillaume, would you like to, do you need me to repeat the question, or welcome? And do you have some thoughts about how the focus on humanity and dignity informs your work?
Yeah, do you listen to me?
Can we hear? We're working on it. I'm going to let Ryan speak while we're getting this.
Yeah, so while we're working on that, sort of ICC at its core is an NGO that's really focused on the safe, sustainable, resilient delivery and affordable delivery of buildings. And the mechanism that we use to do that is through the development of model building codes and standards, which really set the expectations of how do we actually achieve those goals, and how do we deliver on that dignity. And I think the process that we use for the development of those codes really sort of bears that out. We use a very consensus-based process, which brings everyone to the table to identify what the needs are, what the strategies are, and how do we actually get to achievement of those safe, sustainable, resilient, and affordable buildings. And so, sort of the model process, bears all of that out. But then, those codes and standards are just the model. And so being able to sort of use those as a framework to adapt to what the local needs are and really right-size the codes and the standards for the location. And so, it's often easier to start somewhere than rather, sort of start from scratch. And so the model codes really provide sort of that basis of where to start, but really need to be adapted to sort of what the local expectations are and how do you deliver that housing and those buildings in a way that sort of meets those local needs.
Thanks, Ryan. We're going to try to get the audio working here for you, Guilherme.
Well, hi everyone. Is it okay now?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan and Judy, for making this possible. Hi to all the other presenters as well. I have a few comments I wrote down here about the dignity and humanity on housing. And I agree a lot with Haley's talk about housing is a social infrastructure, not just a commodity. I'd like to say I completely agree with Ariana as well on retrofitting should be a priority for climate resilience. And is the audio okay? Hi, is the audio okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, okay. So in the case study we presented, the main concerns were people recovering their livelihoods, going back to their communities, but we had a lot of destructed homes around the entire state. So these relocations were necessary to rebuild some neighborhoods and communities. And modular construction is playing a very important role. We still have around 19,000 people waiting for a new home after the disaster because their houses were partially or completely destructed. And to add to Ryan's presentation, I'd like to say one more advantage about modular construction. I think he didn't mention that, is that in disaster areas, after the disaster, there is a lack of skilled labor, skilled people to rebuild the houses. And with modular construction, we can build in a factory, in a controlled environment, and transport these modules to the site. So we reduce construction time a lot, and we can give these families their houses, their needed housing much faster. So that's another advantage that I advocate for modular construction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that additional insight. Is this on? Okay. We are almost at time, and we have a closing speaker. Do you have something very quick to add, Ariana?
Just very quick. I wanted to, it's important. Yves says, I'm answering one of his questions, or attempting to. So I think can you guys hear me? Is it audible? Okay. The question that you raised about what to do about informal settlements and slums that are in precarious locations, I think is a really, really important one. And one of the things that I would, a response to that I would say is that for sure, those communities shouldn't have to stay in those places. That's not like a way to offer dignity to anybody, right? And to provide housing solutions that insist on them staying there is not reasonable for all of the reasons we've talked about today. But what's required, and often forced evictions are, there's a justification for forced evictions in the name of kind of all the reasons that you said, and I know you're not saying that should happen. So we've seen this happening more and more in the global South, where these communities are forcibly evicted with kind of, they're in an unsafe location, or it's climate action as the justification. And obviously that's also unacceptable. And there's some really interesting research that was recently produced by IIED, the International Institute of Environment and Development, and Build Change was very privileged to be able to offer some of our methodology around embodied carbon to kind of add to this argument, which really shouldn't need to be added to, around forced evictions, to show the embodied carbon emissions of forced evictions. And to really counter this argument that it is in any way a justifiable practice. So a lot of times those communities do need to be relocated if they're truly in an unsafe location. And I think acknowledging why they had to settle there is important. And then providing alternatives that offer dignity and a safe home, et cetera, and don't just kind of tear the shacks down and leave people on the street. So I think that's
I just want to confirm that's not what I was suggesting.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Thank you. And I think Yves Laurent's questions are not meant to be answered in 3 minutes. They are for the next session, right? The next topic of COP. I want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists. I think we've had some really interesting and thought-provoking insight here. So I would like to thank all of you for sharing your time and your examples with us. Please join me in thanking the panelists. As we close now, I'd like to invite Kennedy Matheka to the stage. Kennedy is the Deputy Director for Building Safety at the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development in Kenya. He's also one of the members of the Troika, leading the Intergovernmental Council on Buildings and Climate. Kennedy, please close us out here on affordable housing.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to do our closing remarks in two parts. The first part is to give a perspective of the session in light of what has happened. And first things first, I think I need to appreciate each and every of our presenter of the day for the excellent perspectives that we have been taken through, the case studies and the examples that they have demonstrated. And I think it's a good thing for each and every one of us, especially coming from different geographical and climatic conditions, to see how then do we apply this to realize the objectives of, or rather realizing not just affordable but even resilient homes for each and every one of us in a different way. The second part is we are waiting for some slides, two of them. The second part is to let each and every one of us take cognizance of our roles in different perspectives. Our speakers have really given us those perspectives in terms of what is our role as the drivers of change from within the very community we come from. And therefore, it is a good indication that the speakers have put it in perspective that we have our role not just as persons of change but in institutions. So I would like to appreciate each and every one of you for that perspective and see how best then, being the drivers of the change that we are looking into, then we push it forward in that perspective. The next part of the conversation is about how then have other jurisdictions and other countries have done that. This is a summarized version of what our presenters have looked into. And in our perspective at a Kenyan level is that when we are talking about the very challenges, and this has been well put by our presenters, we are talking about the urban challenges that our people, our local communities do face, whether these challenges are within the issues around population growth, whether this is issues of mobility and traffic congestion issues, whether we are talking about safety and livelihoods of our people, and even talking about the strains of the existing infrastructure and services. So these are some of the things that, and there are quite a number of other things that even have been said by the presenters, and we feel and believe that it is important for all of us as we champion the change from within, take cognizance of the urban challenges that our people do face. And therefore, the four is just among the very many that our presenters have put forward. They have demonstrated, they have shown a good case study around that, and we feel that it creates an enabling environment for all of us to see how then do we deal with the very challenges that we are talking about. Next slide. Now, how do we deal with the very challenges that we have talked about, and even the very many that our presenters have talked about before they do the case studies? There are different strategies that can be applied. What we are talking about as the four of them are just part of what our presenters have given in detail. We are talking about strategy in relations to the very people that you want to create that change for. The second strategy is about how you conduct the issues around designs and baselines and analysis around that. How do you deliver the solutions that you are looking forward into that conversation? And then how then do you want to scale up in terms of, further implementations and strategies in relations to policies and quite a number of other things. So it is important for all of us as we carry out issues around interventions around this conversation, we take note that the best approach in all this conversation is taking it from what we are calling the bottom-up approach, because the solutions that we want to create from within the very people then needs to be realized from the very people that we want to create the solutions for. And therefore, we are talking and we are encouraging the bottom-up approach as a solution to the very problems that we are talking about in realization of resilient homes. The last part, slide. the last part, so that we put it in perspective, and this is in the context of Kenya, we are tying up realization of healthy and affordable housing and living to dignity and people in relations to our decarbonization roadmap that we are working with the Global Buildings Performance Network, where we are the presenter online. And this is not just us. This is how we are looking at things at a global scale. So we are looking at realization of quite a number of other things, and these are the same narratives, the same gospels that we have been pushing and putting for, to see that we all realize in relations to all these conversations that have been put forward. And therefore, as we talk about decarbonization roadmap, we'll be very keen to ensure that we cover all these spectrums. This is for the local people to realize the local solutions for resilient homes and homestead living. And therefore, we'll be keen to see how we grow this conversation with conversation to Belém call for action, and ensure that each and every one of us listening, whether it is online or with us here today, then reap the benefits of this conversation. I would also finally thank the team that is listening to us or following us online. We really appreciate your time, and even to our colleagues who have made it to be here at a physical, to be physically present in this session, we remain grateful. Thank you very much. That was good.